Hi everyone, welcome to the Travel Coach, moving body, mind and spirit. My guest today is an international educator with 30 years of fun-filled experience as a classroom practitioner and leader in international schools. After having worked as a full-time teacher trainer, she now specializes in designing and facilitating customized and engaging professional learning experiences for teams of educators, school boards, and parents. Natalie Croome, welcome to the Travel Coach.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It's very nice to be here, and thanks for letting me be part of your exciting series of talks.
It's my pleasure, Natalie. So if you want to start, maybe put us in background, tell us a bit more about your background, growing up. What can you explain us?
Sure. You may, your listeners may know from my accent that I'm from Australia, and I'm from the island state of Tasmania, so in the southeast of Australia, between Australia and New Zealand a little bit. And I grew up in the northwest coast of Tasmania in a small town called Cooey, very close, as is the case for many Australians, very close to the beach. I grew up there with my mum, my two brothers, who are twins, and my sister. And we had I'm 9 years younger than my sister and 11 years younger than my brothers. So I'm quite the baby of the family. And it's interesting, as I've reflected later, that babies don't often get to do things first. But certainly some of my life experiences have been firsts for our family. And some of my travel has encouraged my family to travel too. So that's been wonderful, a great impact. But we had a very fun-filled house and home. And my brothers are builders and designers, and so they built a beautiful wooden boat in the front yard of our house, and we were always on or by the sea. And my sister also was a teacher, and so she gave me the love of teaching. She shared that with me. And very often we have photos of me on the back steps of our house with the dollies and teddy bears, and my sister Suzanne with her blackboard teaching us all. And then I think from the age of 7 or 8, so in grade 2 or 3, I decided I wanted to be a teacher too. And so when I was 15, 16, when I started to do what we call matriculation, which is grades 11 and 12, my holidays were different to the school holidays. And so I would go and spend time with my sister in her classroom. She was teaching children who were 9 and 10 years old, and she taught me, she shared her passion with me, and then she taught me how to teach, really. She was the first person who taught me how to teach, how to plan, how to work with individuals and appreciate the individual. And then soon I was on my way to Teachers College, where I had a wonderful education as a teacher. I had a wonderful education as a student too. We spent a lot of time on the beach when I was a little girl, and I have great memories of wonderful teachers who inspired me to be creative and to be curious. And so then I formalized that in my professional training. I did 4 years as a teacher, as a primary school teacher, and also as a physical education teacher. I did 2 degrees, and that led to me becoming a fitness leader and a Pilates instructor, which is something I also do still now. And so soon after, after my graduation, in fact, before my graduation, I was very fortunate to already have a position with the Tasmanian Education Department in a very small school in a very small town in the sort of northeast of the centre of our little island. And I was in a school with only 3 teachers and 70 students, and it was very communal and lots of fun. I learned a lot about teaching there, because when one teacher was sick, other teachers stepped in, and so we were teaching. My class was a grade 2-3, so children who were 7 to 9 years old. But I was teaching kindergarten, I was teaching grade 6, and I was, everyone had to be very flexible. That was a great community experience. And then I had 2 years in another school in Tasmania, a bigger school, but on the beautiful east coast with the white sand beaches and lots of families who were fishermen, and lots of very exciting trips for children that we did there. But I didn't travel. I travelled to the mainland of Australia a couple of times as a young girl, and the only time that I had left Australia until I was 25 was on a trip to Hawaii with a friend of mine. We celebrated our graduation by going to Hawaii, and then there was a time when I was looking in that end of those 4 years that I was teaching in Tasmania, is when I began to feel the urge to look in other directions.
Yeah, because so far it looks like a dream come true, right? So you were a little girl looking up at your sister who was teaching you. You always wanted to become a teacher. Yes. You had great education. You had a good position, right, in these schools there. Sure. So it looked like a dream come true. But as you said, something was calling you for more. How was this? What happened?
Yes. Well, just to go back slightly, when I was a little girl, I remember walking home from the beach on my own. I had gone to the beach on my own. It was quite a safe thing to do. And as I was walking back home, I remember having a realization, some kind of strong feeling. I was about 10 years old, and I remember thinking that I won't be living here all of my life. It was just some kind of feeling that I can't really explain. But I hadn't thought about that for a long time until I had my 4 years of teaching qualification or training, and then my 4 years of practice as a teacher. And I began to realize that the world of education in Tasmania was quite a small one, even though the Tasmanian Education Department has a very strong reputation. But I just began to look outside of the classroom walls, and I started environmental education projects with my students, and I began to apply outside of the education department. And one of the things I did was applied for a job in a school in Kalimantan, in Sumatra, and it was to work in a school that was being staffed by the Tasmanian Education Department to provide an education for the children of workers who were working in a mine. And so I applied for that position and interviewed and wasn't successful. And so I just kept looking and kept enjoying my teaching and my life in general there in that beautiful place. And then, yes, out of the blue, one day, very unexpectedly, I received a message from the receptionist of the school where I was working in a little town called St. Helens. And she told me that a lady had called from a town close by called Scottsdale. That was the name of the town. And that she told me the name of the lady, Jan Hughes, and this lady was going to call me back. And I didn't know anything about the reason. In fact, I thought it was a parent who was going to complain about something that I was coaching. I was the coach of a netball team. And as the coach, I was responsible for the uniforms, and I had purchased red socks. The uniform was red and white, and I'd purchased red socks, 2 pairs for each girl, and we were going to represent our region. They were a very good team. And I had complaints from the mothers because the socks at $8 a pair were very expensive, and they already had holes in them, and they were complaining about that. And this lady was from the town where some of these girls had come from, and I thought I was expecting a complaint from a mum. however, I was in the office to receive the call from Jan Hughes, and she told me that she was from the town of Scottsdale and from Tasmania, but that she had several years before she'd moved to Tanzania, and she'd worked with the national school there, and then she had been headhunted to start a small or a branch of an international school, an extra campus or an annex, and that she had heard about me. She had contacted the Tasmanian Education Department. She was at home in Tasmania for her holidays, and they told her that I had applied for the position in Kalimantan and that I may be interested in international education. And so for that reason, she got the school phone number and my name, and she called me and over the phone was offering me a position in Tanzania, in East Africa. And so she, sorry.
So I mean, just imagine the situation, right? So
yes.
Since you were 10 years old, you were thinking about living abroad, working abroad. You were working in the school, doing
Yes.
some applications. None of them accept you, and suddenly somebody unexpectedly calls you
Yes.
from
Yes.
to work in Tanzania. So it's like,
Yes.
yeah. What happened? What did you say? How did you answer?
Well, I told her immediately that I was very interested, and I said yes. You know, whatever the offer was that was coming, I said yes. And she told me that having done a lot of different job interviews in different situations, and in those days all job interviews were face to face, she said that she thought that the best thing that she could do was to drive down from Scottsdale to St. Helens, where I was teaching, and to spend a day in my classroom with me, and that would be the best way to find out what kind of teacher I am. And so it was a very natural situation. She was like my teaching assistant for the day. And in fact, I was never interviewed. She just spent time with me, with my students, and told me when she left, she spoke to the principal of the school and did a little sort of a reference background check about, my the skills that I bring to the job and to life in general. And then as she left, she told me that she would be contacting the head of the school in Tanzania, who would give me a call. And that happened in 4 days. But after the call I had with Jan, I was on my way to a staff meeting with my colleagues, and I went via the library and got an atlas, because I didn't really know where Tanzania was. And so I took this big atlas under my arm to the meeting and was a little bit naughty and distracted, and I didn't pay much attention to the meeting. I was having a look through the atlas to see where Tanzania was.
So excited, right? You were
very,
excited
very.
about this.
I had never thought, as a child, I had heard words like Zanzibar and Casablanca, Marrakesh, and Oman. These names, they somehow struck me as being very beautiful names and words and representing beautiful places. But I really, hadn't thought that I would ever be living in Africa. So I found out that, that Tanzania and the town where I was going to, or where I was hoping to go to, in Arusha, was just south of the Kenyan border, and I knew a little bit about Kenya. And I knew that Tanzania, as the Tanzanians say, and Tasmania are spelled very, very, in a very similar way.
Yeah,
so there was a connection there. Yes. Yeah. And so then the head of the school called me 4 days later and offered me the position. And that was on the 16th of December in 1992. And I left Tasmania on the 28th of January in 1993. And then I was, on the 30th of January, I started teaching in my classroom.
That happened so quick. So what I hear is that you said yes to this, you answered yes before even know where Tanzania was in the map, yeah?
Yes.
Knowing very little about, and we are talking about early 90s where no smartphones, no internet in the phone. So
no.
And you don't even hesitated. I mean, you were so so sure about the answer, or it was something that made you tell us if it was any challenge, or I don't know, maybe the family, the friends? What was the kind of thing that you were maybe not so sure?
Well, I was surrounded by very supportive family and friends, and I didn't know until years later how worried they were. They didn't really show me that they were worried for me because, you know, a 25-year-old going off into deepest, darkest Africa on her own was something that, you know, my mother, my brothers, all of my family, my grandfather were all concerned about, but they were wonderful in that they supported me and they didn't make me feel worried. I stored all of my household items at my grandfather's house, and my mum helped me with that, and you know, definitely gave me. We often talked about. She said, "I gave you the wings. Now I have to let you fly." And I didn't realize until later that she wished that I hadn't had the wings. But she'd given me such a wonderful, and all of my family and the community I lived in, I felt so safe. When I grew up, I felt very safe, and I was also taught to be flexible and spontaneous, and to take risks that were, you know, informed and as safe as they could be. And so I didn't have any fear. It was all anticipation and excitement, and you know, the adventure to come.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's this support is very important, I suppose,
sure,
in this situation, right? And you were very brave and very courageous to go there. So I imagine you arrived there, and what happened? So what the first few days looked like when you arrived?
Oh, well, the first 2 days, so Jan Hughes and her husband, who's Danish, and their 2 young children were waiting at Kilimanjaro International Airport for me. We flew over Kilimanjaro mountain as we landed, and so I really knew that I was there. I had an interesting experience back in those days. It was 48 hours to get there, and I had flown through India and Ethiopia to get to Kilimanjaro. So my trip was from Tasmania to Melbourne, then Melbourne in Australia to Mumbai, then Mumbai to Addis Ababa, and then Addis Ababa to Kilimanjaro. And in Addis Ababa, the civil war had just finished there, and there were no windows in the airport. They were all broken, and I was the only woman and the only white person on the plane, on the flight. And I was also the only person who had a Western idea of what it means to make a line or a queue. So I had men's arms all around me, all giving their boarding passes. And I was giving them my teacher look. It's like, you wait your turn, you know.
Excuse me.
But where I got on the plane and flew over that beautiful part of Africa into Tanzania, Jan and her husband and children were waiting for me, and she said to me, "I knew when you got off the plane, not because you were the only woman or the only white person, but because you walk like an Australian," she told me.
That's funny.
So there was a viewing deck, and I saw them waving to me, and Jan and her husband Holger and their children became very close friends, and she became such a wonderful mentor to me as a person and as a professional. And they took me to their house. We drove. In those days, it was about an hour and a half on a road I'd never seen before, with children in trees and goats by the road and people pushing huge wooden wheelbarrows full of more than they should have been able to push, and no road rules. You just drive where there are the least potholes, you know, so you drive whichever side of the road looks most comfortable. And and we arrived at their house, and I stayed at their house for 2 nights. Soon after I arrived, we normal, but so I had a bottle with a candle in it, and then I stayed with them for 2 nights, and they had friends and teachers who came to meet me And then they drove me not far away to my own home, which was part of the package with the job. I had a lovely home in a compound, walking distance from the school. And so on the Monday morning, I walked to my school, and when I arrived, I met my 12 students who represented 10 nationalities and 11 different mother tongues. And they were such a great resource for me. They taught me so much about Tanzania, about teaching, about language, about culture, about how important it is to accept a new person quickly into your group. And then at the end of that day, I said to Jan, I couldn't find the curriculum anywhere. And she said, well, we don't actually have one. So there was another adventure, because she said, I know enough about you to know that you'll choose good things to teach the students. You teach them some English, and you teach them some mathematics and some science, and you can do art, music, and physical education. You find out from them what's interesting to them.
You have totally freedom to
really
teach.
Again, that unknown, yes, for sure, going into territory that was not, there was no map, really.
Yeah. So because you were when you were explaining, this trip all the way from Australia to Tanzania, a young lady that, as you said, you didn't have so much experiences traveling. You've been in Hawaii, but you didn't have so much experiences out there, and you were through all these airports with all these, for me, it would sound scary being the only woman, the only white woman there, and I don't hear you had any stress at all. I don't know if you had any kind of fear at some point, or was just you were trusting so much that everything was working.
It's very interesting, because years later, as I told you, my mother didn't express concern to me that I was aware of before I left. But years later, she's often still says to me, "You were so brave," and I said, I really, I just, the sense of adventure in me, and the fact that I had grown up with such safety, I think I just took that into everything that I did. And I perhaps very naively believed that I was always safe. And so I just saw all of these things around me as interesting and things to ask questions about, but I didn't feel...
Curiosity, yeah.
Sure, yes, I didn't feel... there were times when I felt nervous or uncomfortable in new situations, but I very quickly, the first night I was in Tanzania, in Arusha, Jan and her husband took me out to a restaurant, and I met people from all different kinds of languages and cultures, and I was amazed that they were all speaking their second or third languages, because English was the language that we all connected with, and so I was amazed at all of their abilities to be so multicultural, and I was just learning how to have that cultural competence that comes only from experience. You can't teach that to someone without them actually doing it, and so you have to learn a lot of things about how people can be sensitive to things that you may not experience yourself in terms of being sensitive, but then also that dissonance or that discomfort that comes when other people from different cultures do things which you think, or which I thought were inappropriate or unusual, and just learning to accept and to not judge, and to find out, to ask questions. Why do you do things that way, and what does that mean for you?
That's a big lesson, right? In life, when we judge the difference, or we feel judged as well, right? Or have to justify yourself. Or what would be the biggest lesson if you say, look, Natalie before Tanzania and Natalie after Tanzania, what was the big transformation that you feel you experienced there?
I think the knowledge that you need to be well prepared and have some kind of sort of strategy and organization behind you. So the connection that I always make, or the nutshell that I bring my experience down into, is the experience of going on safari in Tanzania. And I see my whole life as a safari. So safari in Swahili, in Kiswahili, means journey, really. And so when I think about going on safari, you have your, in my case, I had a Land Rover, and everything had to be ready. You had to have water, you had to have food, you had to have the ability to change your own tire. You wouldn't be able to call the insurance guy or someone to help you, because chances are you'd be pretty isolated and you'd be changing the tire yourself. You'd have to have a bottle of water for the car, and an extra fuel, and the proper clothing, and your binoculars and your camera. So I see that as the toolkit. And I think that once you've done everything you can to prepare for the unknown, then you go and you drive. And then you let, certainly on safari, you let your instinct or your curiosity guide you. And so when you're driving around a national park, I was speaking to my husband about this earlier, that every time we headed out into a national park, we would get to a fork in the road and we'd say, let's go right, or will we go left? Or what did we do last time? Let's do something different this time. And we got lost and we got stuck, and we pulled other people out of sand and mud and made great friends. And every time we came back to our lodge, we were new, we were different. The experiences we had somehow changed us. And so I think for me, it's that be prepared for anything as much as you can, but then expect the unexpected, and you have the resources within you, that all those resilient strengths to get yourself through whatever you face. And in my case, that I was fortunate that I was always able to get out of situations that were tricky.
Yeah. So what I hear is like, focus on the things you can control and trust what you cannot control, and trust in yourself, in your capacities, in your capabilities, and your skills. Yeah, this is
trust in yourself for sure. Yes.
Amazing, Natalie. We are running a bit out of time, but I would like if quickly we can talk about what happened after. So you were teaching in Tanzania, and then you moved. You always you after that had this call again to move. Yeah, what happened?
I did. Well, yes, I moved to after 6 years in Tanzania. I moved to Munich in Germany, and I taught for 3 years in an international school there. So soon after I arrived in Tanzania, I realized I loved this life, and I thought I was going to be one of those teachers who moves often. And in the world of international schools, teachers have a 2-year contract and they move regularly. And I found out I wasn't like that. I think that in international schools there are people who make a nest, the nesters and the campers, and I'm a nester. I like to stay and settle. But I took the chance to go to Germany, and I taught in a beautiful school in Munich for 3 years, but Tanzania was calling me back. So I went back for another 10 years, and I worked in a safari company for a year, and then I went back into education, back in the school that I'd worked in before, with all of the things that I'd learned. And I took a leadership position there, as well as teaching in the classroom. And then I met my husband there in Tanzania. He was also there for work. He's French, and we live now in the south of France. And then after 10 years of lots of wonderful experiences there, we moved to Prague in the Czech Republic, and we lived there for 3 years. And I worked at an international school, and he started his own business there. Then we came and settled back here in France. And then most recently, I was living in Doha, Qatar for 3 years. And that's where I started moving, thinking about what works in classrooms and thinking about what I could share from the experiences I'd had with teachers. And so now I work as a designer and facilitator of learning for teachers. So teaching teachers who are not teachers in university, but teachers who are practicing in schools.
That's an amazing adventure, that everything started there with this call. that you receive
Yeah, yeah, I
unexpected, and
know. I
one
know.
thing brings to the other, right? But I know
Yes.
that when you moved to Germany, it was like also something happened there. It wasn't a coincidence. You were meant to go to the Netherlands and
Oh,
was
yes,
cancelled.
that's right. I was, yes, when I
Yeah,
left
was also
Tanzania,
another
I was
coincidence.
supposed to, good memory. When I left Tanzania, I was actually going to Amsterdam. I had a position organized at the International School of Amsterdam. And it's a long story, but I moved everything. I had everything shipped. I was staying with friends in The Hague, waiting for my job to start in the August. And in the July, I contacted the school and said, I still don't have that contract. And they said, well, yes, that's a bit of a problem, really, because the lady who was leaving the school is not leaving anymore. And so we're sorry, but we don't have a job for you. And I had just picked up everything and moved from Tanzania, which I loved, and that had been very difficult for me, to Europe, because I thought I was going to have another adventure, which I did. And so I reactivated my recruitment file with what was called the ECIS, the European Council of International Schools. They had a great recruitment agency, and in 24 hours I had 3 positions offered to me. One in Munich in Germany, one in the Canary Islands, and one in Malaysia. And I had the amazing opportunity to sort of choose from those 3 locations, and I chose the school. Really, I chose the curriculum, and I chose for my career. Germany wasn't a country, as Tanzania, it wasn't a country that I'd thought I would live in, but I really enjoyed living there. And the other 2 schools didn't have the kind of curriculum that I thought was going to give me the experience I wanted as an international educator. So, and Germany definitely, the school, the Bavarian International School where I worked, definitely gave me, it fed me in lots of ways professionally, and I had a very rich personal life and social life there as well. So it was a great decision to make that move.
Also, life bring you there. So I think you are, a example of how trusting and following, the intuition, the unknown, bring you these beautiful things and this amazing career
Yes.
and life that you can explain now, and you can give back to other teachers and from the experience and the learning. So it's wonderful hearing your story, Natalie. Really, really enjoyed. And
Thank you for letting me share it.
no, absolutely. And I think everybody here listening as well will, think the same. And I would like, that I love collecting hidden gems from all around the world. So I would not like to say goodbye without asking you, where in your town or region would you recommend, that maybe it's not that popular and known, but would you recommend people to visit?
Well, it's really hard because I've thought a lot about this, because there are so many beautiful hidden gems that I could recommend, and our village of Le Plan de la Tour in the south of France is definitely one. But the one that I've picked to highlight is an island off the south coast of Tasmania. So you think Tasmania is far away and remote and small, and then you have another island called Bruny Island, Bruny, which you can only get to by a ferry, by a boat, and you can walk onto the boat, or you can drive your car onto the boat, and it's about a 20-minute crossing, and then you get to, from a beautiful island, you get to another very beautiful island, and I just love that place because it's just so natural, and I almost don't want to tell you about it because we don't want too many people to go there.
Let's say to anybody.
Yes. And when you get there, I love the idea that, one day Michelle, my husband, and I have said we might live there, and we love the idea of having to catch the ferry to go and get the groceries, and just being that little community there is very close and quite international too. And there are a lot of cottage industries, a lot of people making their own wine and honey and cheese, and there's an oyster farm, and so you have everything really that you need, and you'd only have to go to the big island of Tasmania for some things. But one day that might be where we end up going, and maybe you'll come and visit too.
I feel super curious now. I want to check it also in the map.
Oh yes, it's beautiful. It's
Put it
beautiful.
in my bucket list, definitely.
Do.
Okay, Natalie,
Yes.
please can you share with us where people can find you? If somebody wants to contact you, what's the best way?
I think the best way to get to make contact and to find out a bit more about me is through LinkedIn. So you find me with my name, Natalie Croome, or you can also search for my company name because I'm now self-employed. I Teach Solutions. So I Teach stands for International Teacher, and also I Teach. I Teach Solutions is the name of my company. So search for my name or my company, and you'll find out more about me there. And you can send me a message, and
Beautiful
it'd be lovely to. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, Natalie, it's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure to have you on board the Travel Coach today. So I want to say goodbye and wish you and everybody tuning in happy and safe travels. Thank you very much again, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
Take care.
Okay. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.